Okay. Video's on. Now we're ready.
Okay. All right. Hi guys. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Camiba Gallery. And we are going to do an artist talk today. It'll be about 20 to 25 minutes long. We'll be talking with Kate Bradshaw David. And this is her exhibit, Synergy and Synthesis. So we're just going to dive in. I'm going to let Kate tell us a little bit about herself and a little bit about your history.
Okay.
You just go with.
Sure. I'm a native Austinite and have been basically living here most of my life. I started off my art journey my grandmother taught me how to make Ukrainian eggs or pasanki eggs. It's a folk art. And so that's kind of how I got started doing it in my spare time, and I got really into it, and it got to like take up more and more and more time. And then it just sort of morphed into doing art in other ways. I also do clay, and obviously I paint now. And so that's kind of where I started. It was like with the eggs, and it just expanded. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. And we started, we started visiting together years ago, right? It's like I met you at one of the East Austin studio tours.
Yeah, you just dropped by
randomly. Hey, what you got?
Awesome, that was amazing.
And even before I moved to Austin, I was showing your work.
Yeah. So that was fun for me.
Yeah, fun for me too. so we've been showing for a while. And what I love about the paintings that we have in the exhibit is how they're a continuation of all that. So as you were talking about, you've got all these different mediums that you've been practicing with and playing with and working with. But they all sort of have a consistency to them. Do you want to talk about like what you see as consistent with them?
Yeah, it is interesting that I mean people are like, you do so many things, how do you keep track? And it is sort of like I'm sorry to give you whiplash, but I like to follow kind of the same thoughts in different mediums. And so I have interest in color and interest in line and kind of how to put them together. And kind of, I guess the through line for the eggs, in the paintings at least, is that it's not necessarily painting, or it hasn't been. I may be getting closer with some of the new stuff, but it's more, like you were saying, it's more mark making, it's more, I don't know, is the word graphic? It's more graphic illustration than like painting, in shading and stuff like that. It's more like color studies, and I'm interested in how colors interact with each other and then with opposites, and then once you put an outline in between them, what happens then? So that's kind of where I think what holds it all together.
Yeah, and I think like you were saying, mark making, that's what we talked about earlier, is this idea of making a mark on the panel or on the paper. Ties back to the making a mark on the egg, but I think this particular form is sort of the earliest version of sort of when you went into the painting, right? Sort of this really rectilinear mark making and brushwork.
The other thing actually that I realized as I was talking about it is repetition is huge for me, and so. It's not just repetition, but the alterations that happen because of repetition, which is illustrated not just with the size of the lines and the sort of wiggliness of some of the straight lines, but also, like on purpose changing the color a little bit and repeating the color, but seeing how it changes a little bit if I added a little something different. So that's not, I think another thing.
Yeah, I think your eye picks up that this is gray, right? Right. So when you dive into it, it's not.
There's not one same color. I mean, I just sort of like mix while I'm going. I don't mix ahead of time. I'm always just mixing colors as I go. So yeah, there's very few colors that are the exact same one. Each tile is kind of different.
And that's where it gets into the painting, right?
Yes.
So it's mark making, but it's mark making with a painter's color palette and the way a painter uses paint, right?
Yeah, and actually I was a little frustrated when I first started with paints because I wanted a pen that could do what paint was doing, and I never could find it, so I was like, oh, I have to paint now, okay.
Now I have to be a painter. Yeah, but so this is sort of the beginning, and then we've ended up with things that are much more organic, and this maybe isn't even a good interpretation of the most recent, but it's the idea that these much more organic forms and even the changing of forms within one piece.
Yeah.
So you've got various different shapes that are happening to create one image. And is that happening now because of the inspiration that's happened that starts a piece? Is that derived from the seed that starts the painting?
It really, if my head's already here and I'm walking around and I see something, there's something that I'm seeing that gets into my brain that makes me want to follow that thread and see how I can make that into something that I would find interesting and experiment and say, how would that work? So, there's a painting in the show where I was on a walk and I looked down and I saw that, it was in the spring and that beautiful, bright, hot green you get, grass green, that was right up against, a trail of rocks and these dark, beautiful gray, like river rocks. And there was something about that interaction between the gray and the super bright green that I just found to be really, it just sort of like, there's almost a feeling of like fizz in my brain that happens that I'm just like, I want to follow this color. I want to see what's happening with it. So yeah, that can happen with something I see. And then other times, even with the beginning works, it's more that there's a color that I want to figure out.
You want to explore.
And I want to like experience the color and go on a color journey, and so that's what some of them are. So it really, it varies. Kind of, if I don't have an idea that day, then I'll just do something like this and see what happens.
But like you were saying, it's a seed. Like it's something that's just like all of a sudden it's got a nugget that's in there, and you're just gonna pull on that and just figure out where that's gonna go.
Yeah. And
whether somebody else sees that was where that seed started doesn't matter to you. It's your exploration of it.
In fact, this newest one over here, it made me laugh a lot. On Instagram, I posted it, and someone said, "Oh, it's so soothing, and the colors, and it reminds me of this, some soothing situation." And then another friend of mine from high school is like, "It reminds me of being at a concert right up by the front, and they've got the speakers, and I'm looking for someone," and it was just like, okay. But I can kind of see both. If you get close, and it's like, oh, they do look like a bunch of people jumping around and having fun. But it was such a completely opposite reaction, but each one is totally valid and totally cool to hear.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I so love that. Well, yes, so since we're looking at this piece, this is one of the latest pieces, right?
Yes.
And it's not outlined. There's like, it's the brush marks without the outline.
Scary.
Which gives you a much softer feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's just a softer piece, which I think really works with this color palette, especially. And you were saying that was JoJo's.
Yes, so I was painting this. Actually, I painted this one first, and it didn't have outlines, and my daughter was like, "Don't outline it." And I'm like, "I gotta outline it. That's what I do. I outline. I can't not." And so I went ahead and outlined it, and she's like, "I don't think you should have done that." And then I was painting this one with plans to outline it, and it was really not something I felt like doing because it was so big, and it was going to take forever, and it was going to change what was happening in a way that would have made it a little less eerie or free-flowing. It would have made it more like solid, now done. And this one, it was really nice the way it just floated off, and to outline it would have killed it.
I agree.
So, and then of course you came over and like, "Don't outline it."
It's like,
okay, all right.
So you got multiple no's.
Yes. And then I didn't feel like doing it myself, so it was like, "Yep, we're not outlining this one." And I think it turned out very interesting to me, and it's something that I'm gonna follow up because it's a different way of thinking for me.
Okay.
Because a lot of times when I'm painting, I realize, I can fix this later when I do an outline. And this one, it wasn't so much that I can fix it later as that it doesn't matter.
It doesn't,
it doesn't, I don't need to make it perfect. I don't need to cover up flaws or things that are problems. it just is,
Mhm.
which is kind of nice.
Well, and it's still mark making,
Yes.
right? It's
Yeah.
even though it's more painterly, it's still this mark.
Yeah, there's no shading really that happens on the panel. It's all I mix it
You're mixing
and
it,
then I
and then
put
you
it
do it.
up.
Yeah, and you mix it and you put another one.
Yeah.
Right.
Which to me, for me at least, it works better in terms of my personal experience painting it because it's happening right now in my head. Like this color, what happens here? Then I'm gonna mix this and see what happens when I put it up. So it's very much interactive. There's no point where I'm like bored because I'm always seeing how the experience changes every time I put another brush stroke up.
So do you find that the direction of a painting, the painting goes in a different direction from where you started?
Yeah.
When you're doing that process, you
Yeah,
end up
definitely.
going somewhere else.
Well, yeah, sometimes I will work on it and let it sit for a day or two because it just kind of loses its forward momentum and it just kind of sits there and I have to figure out a way to make it more of a conversation than a finished piece. And back to this, the grass green one that I was talking about, I originally painted it and it was just gray with that bright green.
Oh, okay.
And it was just nothing. There was just nothing there. And so I just went back and decided to add a few darker tones and a slightly different color. And it just made it work all of a sudden because there was a little bit more happening. It wasn't just, green and gray.
Yeah, it gave it more depth, more, yeah.
Yeah, it gave it more meaning.
And more ways to make stories with it in your
Yes.
mind, right?
Yeah.
Visual stories. You're like, okay, could really.
Well, there's more color mixing that you can see, so it gets darker on the edges, and it kind of just added more depth and more interest. And the same with this one, the minnows. I painted it as it was going to be really soothing and quiet, and it still is, but it was so soothing and quiet that there was just nothing there because I hadn't added these light blue fish shapes. It was just sort of this line that was kind of dancing around, but it had no reason for being. And I just looked at both of them and I just couldn't figure out why I painted it at all. And then you were coming over the next day and I was like, I gotta do something with this to make it interesting. And so like 1:30 in the morning, I mixed up some of this blue gray and I was like, all right.
There we go.
And I just slapped some down in the middle of a painting that was finished. And it was like, well, I think it worked beautifully. And I was really happy it did because it was just sort of like, I'm ruining a painting, but it ended up just making it happen. All of a sudden it was like, it's alive again.
It gave it that energy.
Yeah, the energy. It really helped. And it brought together the whole idea of like, the kind of circular watery kind of spirals with these fish shapes. They didn't even really start out as fish so much as it was just like here's a shape, and then it turned into it's a fish obviously. So then I was able to take some of these existing things that were happening that probably you don't even notice, you wouldn't have noticed, and then the fish kind of were able to interact with those a little bit. So yeah, it just made it happen.
Yeah, there's so much movement in that. There's just, and you really can dive into it and get these swirls. Right? That just, it does feel like this brook that's flowing down the wall or up the wall or whatever,
Well, and these could be, sand like the rag zone, or it can be reflections on top of the water. There was just there's a lot more depth in it now because of those fish shapes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I brought this egg out.
Oh, yes.
It's just because I wanted to point out, for me, there's a relationship here. This isn't necessarily something that you've pointed out, but something that I just see inherently. There's this color palette, but more importantly, this way of using color, right? This way of undulating with your color palette that you're doing that I think happened on the eggs and is happening in the paintings. And again, it's the idea of the mark making that's happening as well.
Right.
Even though it's a completely different process.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? But you look at it and you can tell that it's sort of the same brain made both of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's this tie to this old work, and you can see how this has grown out of it. It's like it's the same
brain.
Same brain, same hands. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Super cool. David, I don't know if it's going to be too hard for you to get this, but I want to point out this piece here. And, I want you to talk about this piece. So
Okay.
I'm going to get out of the way, David.
Let's go over there. What do you want to know about it?
I don't know. Just talk to me about it. It's just got so much energy. It's vibrant and yeah. What's the seed for that, or what? I don't know.
The seed for this one, I think it was the colors. Again, this one really truly just came from colors. So my process, I can start off with just the outlines. Like sometimes I'll take a picture of like I said, I work with clay, so sometimes clay will do really interesting things with different kinds of colored clays mixing together. And so what I'll do is I'll take a picture of that, and then I'll run it through my computer and turn it into outlines. And then I have those outlines now so that I'm not starting with a completely white page. And then I can just start playing with color and finding shapes and relationships in what's already existing. There's something about like the magic eye, those magic eye pictures or something where it's like I'm working on it, and then all of a sudden, oh, that obviously will go off that way, and then this, and then this will happen. And so there's this synergy or interaction that I'm having with the existing pattern and the colors. And it's sort of like they're telling me where they want to go as I'm sitting there looking at this thing on the page.
This color palette here is just, and it's tremendous. It's just, I can't get enough of it. I wanted to see it so much. I want to go big with it because I just love those colors. It's
this one, I think I was thinking about, like I said, especially with the pandemic, I went for a lot of walks, and I also, for a lot of my life, go up to Minnesota, the northern woods of Minnesota, every summer. And I was thinking a lot about those colors there and the difference between the very bottom of the forest floor, which is mosses and humus, is that the name of it? And wood and rocks and things that are these colors versus these amazing pops of bright, like super bright moss. Or when the sun comes through the leaves, you get these super hot, amazing greens. And so I was thinking of like trees and rooting out, but then also how it interacts with the light. And so, yeah, it's hard to express in words, but in my brain as I'm working on this, there's all these kind of thoughts of what I want to feel or what it's making me feel. And from that, then what do I do next?
Wow. I love that piece. I love that piece. So do you find yourself painting over like surfaces to get there? Or is it laid out and you pretty much stick to a layout? Or does it
what I
change
have
depending?
is I have a penciled outline of the different types of shapes. So lines are totally different than like those crazy 1960s cityscape shapes. So I know kind of the feeling of the outlines and what that's going to look like. And from that, then I can put paint on it, and yeah, it'll change. Like sometimes the shapes change, but overall, I kind of know the feel of the shapes, which then kind of gives a feel for what's happening. Because this color on the minnows would be a completely different painting.
Right. But I guess what I was wondering more of is like if you get in here, if you painted this sort of dark gray color. And do you ever come back over it and go, no, that needs to be a different color?
Yeah.
And you redo that space or?
Yeah, I mean, this one, as I was saying earlier, I had to repaint it because this was all gray.
Okay.
And so I went back and added colors over it for sure. Like I said, I'll paint it and then sometimes I have to step back and let it breathe so that I can know what's happening next. And yeah, because I can kill a painting really easily by just staying with it. And sometimes I just have to put it away, and then it'll like kind of tell me what needs to happen.
Yeah. I also really like the way you do your edges.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I really like kind of the organic edges. I feel like it makes it all cohesive and it sticks together, especially on paper. On the panels, I go off the edges.
Yeah, which is also another great way to do the edges. Right?
I love seeing how the colors then kind of just stretch out, and it's almost like you know, it would be nice if I could just take slices off and have a, you know, painting. So that's kind of, when I'm painting, I definitely like to go off the edges because it just makes it, maybe it has to do with the fact that I started off with a 3D eggs, where it makes it into a 3D kind of sculptural thing instead of just flat on paper. So I did actually start painting on panels, and I think it was because I needed dimension. And because paper made me really nervous.
Let's talk about, like, so you were talking about these shapes, and and this piece in the show is unique in that way.
Yeah.
It's not the only time you've done this, but what are those about? What's the story?
I don't even actually remember where I got the idea of the shapes, but as I was painting, the color sort of demanded more of a energy and expansion and layers. And this reminded me kind of Fordite. Do you know what Fordite is? Mm-hmm. It's from the Ford plant in Michigan, the overspray. And people now will find it because they close the factories, and so they find these paint scraps, and if you put them in a rock polisher, it turns into this amazing agate with like layers of auto paint. Yeah, it's really, they're amazing to see. And so I started thinking about that, and so you can see like there's, you know, circles and circles and circles, and so it was like layers of paint. Not really,
right?
You know?
But in your mind, right?
Yeah, in my brain, it was like, and then they painted this color, and then of course this was the next day, and they just sprayed it. So that's kind of where what was happening with the shapes. It was more just like if you're wearing away a surface and seeing layers of what happened earlier, and then the outlines too on this are a lot different because normally I just have one kind of size outline because I don't want it. I didn't want it really to be part of the painting so much as just to like frame it and define it. Mm-hmm. And with this one, I just felt that firstly, these shapes were too small to take a giant outline. Mm-hmm. But then also it needed to be different to sort of, even though the colors are so different, it seems like that would have been enough. There was something about like, I needed these shapes to be chunkier and these shapes to be a little bit, I don't know, further away or less chunky because they're already so the orange color is so strong that I felt like it would have been fighting. And so the smaller outlines sort of helped them get along.
Yeah, it gave you the definition of the two different areas.
Yeah. And that they're related, but they're also completely different.
Yeah. Love the vibrancy of it.
Yeah, I'm super bright colors make my brain just happy. Like they just make me, you know.
I had somebody else.
Brain fizz.
I had somebody in here earlier, and she was just like, "Oh, the colors on this, I just can't get enough of this piece."
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything you want to talk about that I missed?
I don't believe so. I think we covered pretty much everything.
Do you want to talk about that piece? I think maybe
the yellow.
Yeah.
This one was purely based on I was interested in this yellow, and I was still thinking about mosses, and you know how lichen can be like this sort of dull gray green, sometimes aqua color, and then in lichen it pops this super bright yellow or a rust. And so I chose the yellow because I love yellow, and I just kind of wanted to play with a super super bright yellow. Next to a lichen color. And I didn't want to paint lichen because I don't do that. But I was like, I will choose to paint a circle.
Which, you know, for me reminds me of the sun, right? Like it's just like the sun in the heat of a day, like a big Texas summer day where it's just like everything becomes bleached.
Well, it is, and it's sort of a bleached color. It's like a bleached moss or something, but in the sun it becomes, it's glary. That's sort of like, I'm squinting my eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is, you know, but it's, you know, you got that from
That's what I got, but somebody else, right?
I started off a completely different thing, but
Awesome. All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I really enjoyed it. And
me too.
It's a quick talk, but I hope everybody learned something and enjoyed this as well. And if the show is still up when you're watching this video, please come by and see us. We're now open Thursday through Saturday, 11 to 5. There's 3 more days to see the show, and love for you to come by and visit us. If not, just see the photos online and make an appointment to see any works by Katie that we have left. So, thank you. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.